Hello everyone. Thank you to the organizer for inviting me to present on how could artificial intelligence support and improve the value chain for vaccines. So I am Pierre Morgon. I am a PharmD, also having a Master in Business Law and an MBA. I have several corporate activities, including my own consultancy and essentially developing also startup companies like Ibex and Nuvamid. I hold several board positions, including some in vaccine companies and some in different life science sectors. And I do some investment advisory with family offices, especially. Since some of those companies are listed, I am, of course, presenting only my views, and they're not necessarily the views of the companies I'm involved with. So let's start by setting the stage and talk about the vaccine value chain for a second. The vaccine research and is obviously a long process. It takes, except in pandemic situations, of course, it takes easily 10, 12 years or more between the identification of the targets and the end of the clinical development to get to a registered product. And once it is registered, the manufacturing process itself is actually quite long. And of course, you're looking at multiple operations from drug substance to drug product, all of this under controlled conditions. And also depending on the technology, the process can take more or less time. Of course, with oligonucleotides like RNA, it's a bit faster than with viral vectors or recombinant proteins, but you're generally speaking looking at something which is long and complex, largely due to the regulatory requirements, the safety requirements, and all the compliance required, with the manufacturing especially. The computational models have been used already to accelerate all those phases. Of course, looking at, of course, prior knowledge, and I'll elaborate on this, and also at clinical trial data, but also improving the way quality controls are being implemented, looking at digital twins of the manufacturing sites, and also modeling production process, because typically it's a very complex multi-step process that actually is already enjoying the support of again, as I said, computational models. The core R&D technologies, to start with this one, that are being used to design vaccines include the following. First of all, there's reverse vaccinology, which is about identifying the antigens that would be on the surfaces, typically of the pathogens, based on the genome of those pathogens. This science, of course, has benefited quite extensively from artificial intelligence. The second one is structural vaccinology, which is understanding the conformation, if you will, of the antigen, which is typically a protein or a sugar, polysaccharide. There's also synthetic biology, which is the use of synthetic genes, so that you would actually, use those genes to actually get to a target protein, for instance. It could be used also for, cancer therapies. And lastly, the science of adjuvants. Which is about enhancing the immune response, which is triggered by the vaccine. All of those technologies, in all their respective complexities, have benefited largely from the use of artificial intelligence, essentially accelerated during the COVID-19 pandemic. The once you reach the question of the production, there's really two main, I would say, blocks or steps, if you will. There's the drug substance and then there's the drug product. The first part, the bioprocessing, is about maintaining banks if you grow things on cell, or if you grow live pathogens, whether you inactivate them or not. Of course, it's a bit simpler if you're using RNA, but you still have to produce DNA codon to produce RNA. Then you have the multiple steps of the development and the production, purification, and etc., until you get to the formulation, which is especially complex when you have multiple ingredients with different conformations and the risk of substantial interaction. This is probably the most, I would say, complex part of vaccine production. But still, even the filling and finishing, aseptic filling is not a trivial operation, and then the management of the downstream cold chain and supply chain is also quite challenging. So overall, you're looking at multiple steps, long process, lots of complexity. Of course, the same quality requirements that I was mentioning before are applying, and there artificial intelligence is actually helping to optimize those steps, improve the yields, improve the output, and make better use of the footprint and the capital investment. And so once you zoom out and you have the manufacturing process down below, of course, you get all the inputs, you get the little factory here. I was just mentioning the supply chain. All this has to happen under strict cold chain requirements, and the logistics can be horribly complex. Everybody keeps in mind the complexity of disseminating the RNA vaccines during the pandemic, which require deep freezers, and because they were not actually very stable at regular fridge temperature. Of course, you have multiple people involved with different organizations that need to be properly interconnected, and all along this chain, what you have is the use already of models to make sure you get the right inputs on time, that your processes are optimized, that your supply chain is properly modeled, that you have a good understanding of demand, and that you can essentially build a realistic and achievable vaccination programs. All of those, again, have been activities have been largely supported by the use of AI. And as I was saying, there has been a huge acceleration of the use of AI during the pandemic, because the sense of urgency was evidently greater, and one had to, act without any undue hesitation, and to make sure that the population would be properly covered in a timely manner. Um, and and so this is a bit of a complex illustration, but actually it actually captures very well that AI was used not only for what I was mentioning, which was the development, the discovery of not only vaccines but also drugs, antivirals, but it was used also to manage the diagnosis. Once we had a good understanding of the pathophysiology of the disease, understanding how the disease would reflect in early stage on the how it would present itself, which symptoms it would actually trigger. All that thinking was actually largely also supported by the use of artificial intelligence to pour through the huge amount of data that was generated across all the countries, by the way, and there was a need to leverage all this clinical evidence that was assembled around the world. Um, and of course, in terms of the development, as I was mentioning before, on the basic principles, because artificial intelligence was already in use, it accelerated the identification of the protein targets, the famous receptor binding domain of the spike protein, but also, the other proteins like the stem protein and other proteins that were more conserved and that were particularly useful for the identification of a library of epitopes that's will be particularly relevant, especially for cellular immune response. And and of course, once the AI has been used to design the candidates for vaccine, the question is, could this be useful down down the along the development pathway? And the answer is definitely yes. First of all, in preparation and execution of the clinical development, making sure that the studies would be clinical studies would be executed in a timely manner, would be done efficiently, facilitating the enrollment of patients, in this case of subjects, because you're looking at healthy people being enrolled into vaccine studies, and also in putting together the regulatory dossiers so that you would actually meet the regulatory requirements in terms of the burden of evidence that has to be assembled by the companies, and being actually more efficient in this task as well. Now, artificial intelligence is also used in preparation of future pandemics, because as the saying goes, the question is not whether we will have a future pandemic, but the question is really when. And so right now, also leveraging the insights from the past pandemics, the COVID-19 one, but also prior to this, the H1N1 or the H5N1 scare, there's a lot of work that is being put into, especially anticipating what would happen in case of an unknown pathogen. Okay, the coronavirus that struck in 2019 was not the first one to move from animal to human, but of course, it was the first time that it spread so fast and that it had such a huge burden on human lives and on the world economy. So lots of work is being made, leveraging those insights in terms of having a platform for the discovery of antibodies to also deploy them quickly, understand also better the mechanism to have manufacturing footprint that would be ready to act and to be deployed or to be mobilized. There are right now vaccine hubs that are being implanted in many countries, leveraging, of course, RNA, but also other technologies, and trying to keep them what is called warm and ready in case, God forbid, we have to redirect them from the production of routine vaccines to the production urgently of pandemic vaccines. So I guess in practice, the question is, what should really be done? The thing is that artificial intelligence could be leveraged along the entire value chain, and this is of particular importance, of course, for the industry and for the authorities, the influencers, and the payers. At the individual level, which is the end users, you, me, being vaccinated, in an encounter with a healthcare professional, of course, we're interested in having vaccine produced potentially locally, but we are interested in finding the vaccines, making sure that it is available, that we can access the vaccine easily, and that it is affordable. Okay, and we need to have the right level of course of trust in vaccines, which is a bit of a problem. But where AI actually plays a role is also in modeling the collective benefits and also maybe fueling the thinking as to what would be relevant to build in a given country, so that you don't reinvent the wheel completely, but you have at least an element of self-sufficiency, which is provided. The making sure that the production footprint is tailored to meet the supply requirements for routine vaccines, and also to be mobilized for pandemic needs if need be. That you work also on the all the supply chain, cold chain network, and etc., so that you keep it functional, and even though it may not be used in full. And lastly, ensuring that whatever you produce, whether it is from large factories in limited number of locations, or a smaller, which is more the trend today, smaller factories that are more disseminated close to where the population bases are, well then, in order to ensure that the vaccines produced there are affordable, you want to leverage those footprints and have the right tech transfer, so that the local skills can be developed and nurtured in order to maintain not only the equipment, the manufacturing footprint, but also the workforce for production, for quality control, and for quality assurance. And all this can work only over time if demand is predictable, and if essentially the manufacturers can anticipate demand, and therefore know that they can commit the resources in an efficient manner, so that they maintain low cost of goods, therefore ensure lower price, but still profitable, so that the whole model becomes genuinely sustainable. And that was actually the last slide I had. I'll be happy to take any questions, probably in a deferred manner, because this conference is entirely virtual. Those are my directions. Don't hesitate to connect. I wish all of you a good rest of the conference and a good rest of the day. Thank you.